Hey guys, tonight we begin not with a tale from Shakespeare's original stage, but with something far more intriguing. What if The Tempest had been written in 1977? Because believe it or not, translating magic, revenge, and redemption into the era of spiritual communes, counterculture, and meditation retreats creates something unexpectedly powerful. From Prospero's island sanctuary to ayahuasca ceremonies under copper domes, this retelling trades Renaissance sorcery for 1970s mysticism, where the real magic happens in consciousness itself. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's drift to an island where storms aren't just weather, and transformation is the only way forward. The sky above the Andaman Sea turned the color of a bruise in the summer of 1977. Purple clouds swirled against a sickly yellow horizon, and the wind carried the smell of ozone and salt. A white yacht, called the Prospero, cut through increasingly violent waves, its polished teak deck gleaming even as rain began to slash sideways across its bow. On board, men in expensive linen suits clutched their whiskey glasses and laughed too loudly, trying to ignore the way the vessel pitched and rolled beneath their Italian leather shoes. Antonio Prospero stood at the yacht's helm, his silver hair perfectly styled, his eyes hidden behind aviator sunglasses despite the darkening sky. He wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. Beside him, his companion Sebastian adjusted his own collar, his face going green as the waves grew higher. Behind them, old Gonzalo the accountant, who had enabled their schemes, tried to light a cigar that the wind kept extinguishing. "We should turn back," Sebastian shouted over the rising storm. The weather report didn't mention this. Antonio laughed, but there was something hollow in it. "Since when do we turn back? The island's just ahead. We'll ride it out there, find whoever's squatting on our property, and have them removed by nightfall. That land is worth millions once we develop it." The yacht lurched violently. Somewhere below deck, glass shattered. The captain, a weathered local man named Francisco, emerged from the cabin, his face tight with fear. "Sir, we need to change course immediately. This isn't natural. The instruments are going crazy." "There's no such thing as unnatural weather," Antonio snapped. "Just incompetent sailors who can't handle a little rain." But it wasn't a little rain. The typhoon descended on them like the fist of an angry god. Waves rose 30 feet high, mountains of dark water that crashed over the bow and sent men sprawling across the deck. The wind screamed, a sound like 1,000 voices crying out in languages no one could understand. Lightning split the sky in fractal patterns, illuminating the terror on every face. The yacht spun like a toy in a bathtub. Antonio lost his sunglasses, and without them, his eyes showed raw panic. Sebastian clung to a railing, praying to gods he'd spent decades mocking. Gonzalo was on his knees, his expensive cigar lost to the violent sea, his lips moving in prayers he'd forgotten he knew. Through the chaos, through the rain that fell like bullets, and the wind that tore at their clothes, they glimpsed it, an island rising from the storm like a vision. White stone structures gleamed between palm trees and flowering vines. Terraced gardens climbed steep hillsides. At the highest point, A meditation pavilion with a distinctive copper dome caught the lightning and seemed to glow with inner fire. The yacht drove toward the island's rocky shore with the inevitability of fate. Men screamed. Wood splintered. The sound of the hull tearing open was like the world ending. And then, as suddenly as it had come, the storm ceased. The wind dropped to a whisper. The rain stopped mid-fall, droplets hanging suspended in the air for one impossible moment before pattering gently down. The waves smoothed into glass. In the sudden silence, the men could hear birds singing in the jungle and the distant sound of wind chimes. The Prosperity lay broken on white sand, its elegant lines twisted, water pouring from its shattered hull. The men dragged themselves onto the beach, coughing seawater, their fine clothes torn and soaked. They looked around at the paradise that had somehow become their prison. None of them yet understood that the storm had not been an accident. None of them knew that 12 years ago Antonio had betrayed his own brother, another Prospero, the true Prospero, and stolen from him an ashram, a fortune, and a legacy. None of them knew that the brother they'd cast adrift with his infant daughter had not only survived, but had transformed into something far more powerful than the charlatan guru they'd destroyed. On the highest terrace of the island sanctuary, a man stood watching. His name was Prospero Marcus Prospero, though most people simply called him the teacher now. He wore simple white cotton clothes, loose-fitting pants, and a shirt that hung open to reveal prayer beads made of Redrexus seeds. His long hair and beard had gone silver, but his body was lean and strong from years of yoga and discipline. His feet were bare against sun-warmed stone. His eyes dark and deep as wells watched the shipwrecked men with an expression that might have been compassion or might have been something far more complex. Beside him stood a young woman of ethereal beauty. Miranda Prospero had turned 17 that spring, though she barely remembered any world beyond this island. She had her father's dark eyes, but her mother's delicate features. Her mother, who had died of fever in those early desperate years after the exile. Miranda wore a flowing cotton dress dyed with island herbs to a soft saffron yellow, and flowers were woven into her long black hair. She had never seen men like these before, men in ruined suits stumbling on the beach like broken dolls. "Father," she whispered, her voice carrying the musical accent of someone who'd learned English from meditation chants and poetry. "The storm, did you?" Prospero smiled, a sad and knowing expression. "The universe moves in mysterious ways, my child. Sometimes the cosmos conspires to bring teachers and students together. Those men down there, they have much to learn about the nature of reality, about karma, about the debts that time never forgets. But you're not going to hurt them?" Miranda's voice held concern. She had been raised on principles of ahimsa, of nonviolence and compassion for all living things. "Hurt them?" Prospero's laugh was soft. "No, my dear. I'm going to save them. I'm going to show them truths they've spent their entire lives running from. Whether they experience that as salvation or suffering," he trailed off, his hands moving in a mudra of acceptance, "that will depend entirely on them." From somewhere in the gardens below, a voice called out, young, male, eager as a puppy. "Master, Master, is it done? Did I do well? The storm was exactly as you taught me. I channeled the energy just like you showed me. I became one with the wind and the rain and the peace, Ariel," Prospero called back, amusement in his voice. "Yes, you did beautifully. Now comes the next phase. Go to them. Take the form of a fellow survivor. Learn their hearts." Especially watch my brother watch Antonio. I need to understand what 12 years have made of him before I decide what truth he's ready to receive. On the beach, Antonio Prospero pressed his hands against wet sand and tried to steady his breathing. His cream suit was ruined, stained with salt and blood from a cut above his eyebrow. Around him, the other survivors were taking inventory of their bodies and their situation. Sebastian had lost a shoe and was limping badly. Gonzalo's round face had gone pale as paper, but he was already trying to organize the others, his accountant's mind seeking order in chaos. "Is everyone alive?" Gonzalo called out, his voice hoarse from screaming during the storm. "Count off, Francisco? Where's the captain?" "Here," came a weak voice from near the tree line. Francisco emerged from behind a fallen palm frond, clutching his ribs. "3 of my crew are missing. They were below deck when..." His voice broke. "They might have made it to shore somewhere else." Antonio struggled to his feet, brushing sand from his clothes with hands that trembled, despite his efforts to control them. "This is impossible. That storm came from nowhere." And the way it stopped, he turned to stare at the broken yacht, at the impossible calm of the water beyond. "Something's wrong here." "Wrong?" Sebastian laughed, a brittle sound edged with hysteria. "We just survived a typhoon, and you think something's wrong?" "We're alive, Antonio, on an island." "Your island, as it happens? The one you were so eager to survey for development." "Well, congratulations, we're here." Before Antonio could respond, a figure appeared from the jungle path. He was young, perhaps 25, with wild blonde hair that hung past his shoulders and eyes the color of tropical sky. He wore patched bell-bottom jeans and a vest made of what looked like woven grass, his chest bare and tan bronze by the sun. Around his neck hung multiple strands of beads, turquoise, amber, crystal, and his wrists were wrapped in braided leather. He moved with an almost supernatural grace, his bare feet making no sound on the sand. "Far out," the young man said, his voice carrying a California accent, with something else underneath, something that didn't quite fit. "That was one hell of a wipeout, brothers. You cats okay?" The shipwrecked men stared at him. Antonio found his voice first. "Who are you? Do you live here?" "Name's Ariel," the young man said with an easy smile. "Yeah, man, I've been crashing on this island for a while. It's a total paradise, you know. Good vibes, clean water, plenty of fruit." He walked closer, studying them with curious eyes. "What brings you corporate types out to this corner of nowhere? Bit off the usual yacht club route, isn't it?" "Our boat was destroyed," Sebastian said, stating the obvious, because nothing else made sense. "We need to radio for help. Do you have communications equipment? Is there a village?" Ariel's laugh was like wind chimes. "Communications? Brother, this place is about disconnecting, not connecting. But hey, don't stress. There's shelter up in the compound. The teacher won't mind visitors. He's all about hospitality and karma and that whole scene." He gestured toward the terraced gardens visible above them. "Come on, I'll show you the way. You guys look like you could use some herbal tea and maybe some meditation to process that trauma." "The teacher?" Gonzalo asked, his accountant's instincts immediately suspicious. "What kind of operation is this? Some sort of retreat center?" "Operation?" Ariel seemed genuinely amused. "No operation, man. Just a place for people who want to get their heads straight, you know? Explore consciousness, find enlightenment, grow their own vegetables." He started walking up a path lined with flowering bushes, then paused to look back. You coming, or you want to hang out on the beach in those wet monkey suits? Antonio exchanged glances with Sebastian. Neither man liked the situation, but neither could see an alternative. The island showed no signs of modern development beyond the structures above. No power lines, no roads, no antenna towers. Just jungle, gardens, and those white stone buildings that gleamed like temples in the afternoon sun. They followed Ariel up the winding path. As they climbed, the island revealed itself in layers. Terraced gardens overflowed with vegetables and herbs they couldn't name. Solar panels glinted between the trees. At least the place had some technology. Stone cisterns collected rainwater. They passed a pen where chickens scratched at the earth, and another where a goat lifted its head to watch them with horizontal pupil eyes that seemed disturbingly intelligent. But it was the other inhabitant they encountered that stopped them cold. He emerged from a tool shed, carrying a bundle of firewood on his massive shoulders. He was huge, over 6 feet tall, and built like a wrestler going to seed, with a prominent belly hanging over his grimy jeans. His skin was sun-darkened to the color of teak, and his black hair hung in greasy tangles. His face was broad and flat, with small eyes that held a mixture of resentment and dim cunning. He wore a denim vest covered in patches, mostly rock bands like Black Sabbath and L.D. Zeppelin, and his thick arms were covered in crude prison-style tattoos. "Caliban," Ariel called out in a voice that had lost its friendly warmth. "Get that wood to the kitchen, and stay away from the guests, you understand?" The big man Caliban glared at Ariel with naked hatred. "I understand, Master's favorite," he said, his voice a sullen rumble, with an accent that might have been Cajun or Caribbean or something in between. "I understand Caliban does all the work while pretty Ariel dances and plays his flute. I understand Caliban hauls and sweats while—" "Just do your job," Ariel snapped, and for a moment something flickered in his eyes, something that wasn't quite human. Caliban's gaze shifted to the newcomers, and his expression changed to something uglier. More guests for the teacher. More seekers of wisdom. He spat in the dirt. "This island was mine before the teacher came. My mother's island. She knew the real magic, not this meditation and crystal bullshit. She could make the dead walk, and the enough," came a new voice, calm but carrying absolute authority. Everyone turned. Prospero stood on the path above them, Miranda at his side. The afternoon sun created a halo effect around them, making them appear almost to glow. The teacher descended with measured steps, his bare feet silent on stone, his face serene. "Welcome, travelers," Prospero said, and his voice was warm honey and cold steel all at once. "Welcome to the island of transformation. I am called teacher here, though I once had other names." His eyes found Antonio's, held them. "Some of you may even remember who I used to be." Antonio's face went white as ash. He remembered. The moment stretched like taffy, thick with recognition and dread. Antonio's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. His eyes traced the features of the man before him, older, transformed, but unmistakably his brother. The brother he had betrayed. The brother he had cast out with nothing but a baby daughter and the clothes on his back. The brother who, by all reasonable calculation, should have died 12 years ago in some nameless place, unmourned and forgotten. Marcus? The name came out as barely a whisper. "But you. We heard you died in Calcutta. Fever. The reports were confirmed." Prospero's smile held the patience of ancient mountains. Reports can be purchased, dear brother, just as loyalty can be bought and sold. Yes, I survived. My daughter survived. And in surviving, we found something you could never understand with your balance sheets and your greed. He gestured to the island around them, to the gardens and structures that spoke of years of careful cultivation. We found truth. Sebastian stepped forward, his limp momentarily forgotten in his confusion. I don't understand. You two are brothers? You know each other? Know each other? Prospero's laugh was soft and sad. Oh, yes. Once, a lifetime ago, we were partners in a spiritual enterprise. The Celestial Light Ashram in Northern California. Perhaps you've heard of it? Very fashionable among celebrities and seekers. We built it together, Antonio and I. I provided the genuine spiritual knowledge I'd gathered from years studying with real masters in India. Antonio provided the business acumen, the marketing, the connections to wealthy patrons. Gonzalo's face had gone from pale to red. He remembered now the lawsuits, the hostile takeover, the paper trail he'd helped create that had made it all legal. That had painted Marcus Prospero as mentally unstable, dangerous, misappropriating funds. Marcus, if you'll let me explain, Gonzalo started. Explain? Prospero's voice remained gentle, but his eyes had gone hard as obsidian. Explain how you forged documents declaring me incompetent. Explain how my own brother had me drugged and committed to an institution while he seized control of everything I had built. Explain how, when I escaped with my infant daughter, you sent people to ensure we'd never return to challenge your theft. Miranda moved closer to her father, her hand finding his. She had heard pieces of this story over the years, but never in the presence of the men who had perpetrated it. Looking at them now, these bedraggled figures in their ruined suits, she found it hard to reconcile them with the demons her imagination had created. Father, she said softly, they look so ordinary. It was perhaps the most damning thing she could have said. Antonio flinched as if struck. Sebastian's face twisted with shame. Even Gonzalo looked away, unable to meet the young woman's clear, innocent gaze. Antonio found his voice, and with it, some of his old arrogance. Fine. You want recriminations? You want to play the victim? We did what we had to do, Marcus. You were losing touch with reality. You actually believed your own mystical nonsense. You wanted to give everything away, turn the ashram into some kind of charity. Do you know how much money we had invested? How many important people had stakes in that operation? And so you destroyed me to protect your profits, Prospero said, nodding as if Antonio had just confirmed the mathematical proof. Yes, I understand the logic. What you don't yet understand is that your actions, your betrayal, set in motion a chain of karma that has led you here, to this beach, to this moment. The universe has delivered you to me, brothers. Delivered you to learn lessons you've spent 12 years avoiding. Ariel had been watching the exchange with bright, eager eyes. So these are the ones, teacher? The ones you've been preparing for? Yes, Ariel, these are they. Prospero turned his attention back to the shipwrecked men. You'll stay here as my guests. There's no way off the island at present. The storm has made the waters treacherous, and it will be days before they're calm enough for any boat to approach. Days in which you'll have the opportunity to reflect, to meditate, to perhaps glimpse the nature of the reality you've denied. You can't keep us prisoner, Sebastian blustered. That's kidnapping. When we're rescued, there will be legal consequences. Prisoner? Prospero raised an eyebrow. You're shipwrecked survivors accepting the hospitality of a remote settlement. Where's the imprisonment? You're free to leave whenever you wish, though I'd recommend against trying to swim to the mainland. The currents are quite treacherous, and there are sharks. Caliban had been watching all of this with a twisted grin. The teacher's being merciful, he rumbled. If it was up to me, I'd have let you drown, or fed you to the island. This place has teeth, you know. My mother taught it to bite before she died. Before the teacher came and made everything soft and peaceful, he spat the last words like curses. Caliban, Prospero said, his voice sharp as a blade. Return to your work, and remember our agreement. You serve, and in serving, you eat and have shelter. The alternative is the pit, and you know well how uncomfortable that can be. The big man's face darkened with rage, but he hefted his firewood and shambled away, muttering what sounded like obscenities in several languages mixed with what might have been actual curses. Miranda watched him go with troubled eyes. Father, must you be so hard on him? He's suffered so much already. He's suffered the consequences of his own actions, as all beings must, Prospero replied. Just as these men will suffer or transcend according to their choices in the days ahead. He turned back to his brother and the others. Come, you need dry clothes, food, and rest. Tomorrow your real education begins. Tonight you're simply shipwreck survivors, grateful for shelter. Aren't you? It wasn't really a question. Antonio, Sebastian, and Gonzalo followed Prospero and Miranda up the path toward the compound, Ariel bringing up the rear. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The island's beauty was undeniable, a paradise of flowers and birdsong and gentle breezes. But to the men walking that path it felt less like paradise and more like the most beautiful prison imaginable. They didn't yet know how right they were. They didn't know that Prospero had been preparing for this reunion for 12 years. They didn't know that every moment of their stay would be orchestrated, every experience designed to strip away their illusions and force them to confront the men they'd become. They didn't know that on this island the teacher had learned to do more than meditate. He had learned to reshape reality itself. The real tempest was only beginning. Night fell on the island of transformation like a velvet curtain, and with it came the sound of drums. Not recorded music, but actual drums hand-played rhythms that pulsed from somewhere deep in the compound. The shipwrecked men had been given simple cotton clothes to replace their ruined suits, and they sat now in a communal dining pavilion, its open sides allowing the tropical breeze to flow through. Oil lamps flickered in brass holders, casting dancing shadows on whitewashed walls decorated with intricate mandalas and Sanskrit calligraphy. Prospero presided over the meal like a benevolent king, though he ate sparingly mostly rice and vegetables, with the careful attention of someone who considered food a form of meditation. Miranda served the guests with graceful efficiency, her movements almost choreographed, as if she'd been trained in some ancient ritual of hospitality. The food was simple but delicious: curried lentils, flatbread baked in a clay oven, fresh papaya and mango, herbal tea that smelled of lemongrass and ginger. Antonio pushed his food around his plate, his appetite destroyed by the surreal circumstances. Across the low table, Gonzalo ate with the mechanical determination of a man trying to maintain normalcy through routine. Sebastian had drunk 3 cups of the herbal tea and was beginning to look drowsy, his eyelids heavy. "You built all of this yourself?" Gonzalo asked, his accountant's mind struggling to calculate the resources required. "The structures, the gardens, the water systems?" "Not alone," Prospero replied. Caliban was here when we arrived, the son of a woman who'd been using the island for her own purposes. His mother, Sycorax, was a practitioner of the darker arts, a mambo who'd fled New Orleans after certain accusations. She died before we could reach any understanding. Caliban remained, and he had knowledge of the island's resources, though his cooperation has been reluctant. And the other one, Ariel? Sebastian's words came slowly, as if he had to fish them from deep water. Ariel is my student, my most advanced disciple. Prospero's smile was enigmatic. He came to me broken, addicted to substances that were destroying his mind and body. I taught him to channel his energies, to transform his consciousness. Now he can do things that would seem impossible to ordinary perception. The storm that brought you here, Ariel orchestrated it, under my guidance, manipulating weather patterns through focused meditation and energy work. Antonio barked a harsh laugh. You expect us to believe that kid made a typhoon through meditation? Marcus, you've gone completely insane. This is what I was afraid of 12 years ago. You've disappeared into your delusion so deeply you can't see reality anymore. Reality, Prospero mused, sipping his tea. Such a flexible word. Tell me, brother, when you sleep tonight, when you dream, will those dreams be less real than this moment? When Ariel appears to you as a beautiful woman or a terrifying demon, will your body's response be less genuine because the form is illusory? Before Antonio could respond, a new sound cut through the night, not drums this time, but a human voice calling for help. The cry came from somewhere down near the beach, distant but desperate. Prospero's head tilted, listening. A small smile played at his lips. Ah, the final piece arrives. Miranda stood abruptly, her face filled with concern. Father, someone's in trouble. We must help them. Go then, daughter. Take a lamp. See what the tide has delivered. Prospero's voice was gentle, but his eyes glittered with purpose. Miranda grabbed one of the oil lamps and hurried toward the path leading down to the beach. After a moment's hesitation, Ariel followed her, moving like a shadow. The shipwrecked men watched them go, too exhausted and confused to question the strange dynamics of this place. On the beach, the lamp's light revealed a figure sprawled on the sand just beyond the reach of the waves. He was young, perhaps 19 or 20, with dark hair plastered to his skull and a lean, athletic build. He wore the remnants of expensive clothes, designer jeans with flared legs, a silk shirt torn open to reveal a tanned chest, a leather jacket now heavy with seawater. Around his neck hung a gold chain with a medallion, something with astrological symbols etched into it. Miranda knelt beside him, setting the lamp in the sand. He's breathing. Help me turn him. Together she and Ariel rolled the young man onto his back. He coughed, seawater spilling from his mouth, and his eyes fluttered open. They were striking eyes green as jade, framed by dark lashes, currently glazed with shock and exhaustion. Am I dead? He mumbled. Is this? Are you an angel? Miranda laughed softly, the sound like bells. No angel. Just a person. You're alive. You're safe. What's your name? Ferdinand, he managed. Ferdinand Alonso. I was on a boat. My father's boat. We were following the yacht, the Prosperity. My father is the governor of... He stopped, his face crumpling. The storm. Oh God, the storm. Where's my father? Where's the boat? Ariel's expression had gone carefully neutral. You were on a second vessel, following the yacht? Yes. The Prosperity had Antonio Prospero and his associates. My father, Governor Alonso, had business with them. Some kind of deal? I don't know the details. I just came along because—" he trailed off, embarrassed, "because I wanted to get out of the mansion for a while. I didn't expect—" Miranda touched his hand, a gesture of pure compassion. "The storm was terrible. But you survived, and you're here now. Can you stand? Our compound has shelter, food, medical supplies." Ferdinand looked at her fully for the first time, and something passed between them, a recognition that transcended logic, a connection that seemed to short-circuit everything else. He stared at her face, illuminated by lamplight, framed by flowers and dark hair, and he seemed to forget about his father, the storm, the danger. "You're the most beautiful person I've ever seen," he said with the simple honesty of someone too shocked for pretense. Miranda felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had never been looked at like this, had never felt this strange electricity in her stomach. The island had no young men, except Caliban, who terrified her, and Ariel, who was more spirit than flesh. This Ferdinand, with his green eyes and his vulnerability, was something entirely new. "Come," she said, helping him to his feet. "My father will know what to do. He'll help you find your people." But Ariel, watching them, saw the way they looked at each other, saw the instant magnetism, the fairy tale quality of the moment. And he understood immediately what Prospero had planned. The teacher had separated Ferdinand from his father deliberately, had guided this young man to wash up on the beach at precisely the moment Miranda would find him, had orchestrated a meeting that already looked like destiny. "This way," Ariel said, his voice carefully neutral. "But maybe don't mention your father's business dealings to the teacher just yet. Politics can be complicated." They moved up the path, Miranda supporting Ferdinand on one side, her touch sending electricity through both of them. Behind them, the ocean whispered against the sand, and somewhere in the jungle those drums continued their hypnotic rhythm. In the compound, Prospero felt them approaching and smiled into his tea. Phase 2 was beginning perfectly. Ferdinand's arrival in the dining pavilion created an immediate tension that crackled like static electricity. Antonio's face drained of color when he saw the young man, and he half rose from his cushion before sitting heavily back down. Sebastian actually gasped. Even Gonzalo's perpetual composure cracked, his eyes widening with recognition. "Ferdinand Alonso," Antonio breathed. "The governor's son. You were on the second boat." Ferdinand, still leaning on Miranda for support, nodded weakly. "You know my father? Is he here? Did his boat make it through the storm?" The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Prospero stood slowly, his white clothes seeming to glow in the lamplight, his face serene but his eyes sharp as hawk glass. He moved toward Ferdinand with the measured steps of a dancer or a predator. "Welcome, young traveler," Prospero said softly. "I am the keeper of this sanctuary. You're safe here, though I'm afraid I have difficult news. We've seen no other vessels, no other survivors. If your father's boat was caught in the same storm—" He let the implication hang. Ferdinand's knees buckled. Miranda caught him, her arm around his waist, her face pressed close to his. "No," Ferdinand whispered. "No, he can't be. We had arguments, so many stupid arguments about his business deals, about the corruption, and the last thing I said to him was that I was ashamed to be his son." His voice broke. "I can't. Those can't be the last words." Miranda guided him to a cushion, sitting beside him, her hand finding his. "You don't know that he's gone. The ocean is vast. There could be other beaches, other parts of the island. Tomorrow in daylight we'll search. Antonio watched this interaction with a calculating expression. He leaned toward Sebastian and whispered, "This complicates things. If Governor Alonso is dead, there'll be investigations. They'll trace our route, our intentions. The land deal. The land deal is the least of our problems," Sebastian hissed back. "We're stranded on an island with a madman who thinks he can control the weather. And now the son of one of the most powerful men in the region is here as a witness." Prospero had returned to his place at the head of the low table. He observed them all with the patient attention of a chess master, watching pieces move according to a plan only he could see. "Please, young Ferdinand, eat. Restore your strength. Tomorrow will bring what it brings, but tonight you need rest and nourishment." Miranda prepared a plate for Ferdinand, selecting the softest bread, the ripest fruit. She poured him tea, her movements so attentive that everyone in the pavilion could read the story being written. This was a girl who had never seen a young man her own age, never felt attraction, never experienced the magnetic pull of romantic possibility. And Ferdinand, traumatized and vulnerable, was falling into her care like a moth into flame. Ariel watched from the shadows at the edge of the pavilion, his expression unreadable. He understood his role in Prospero's design, but something about the naked emotion between Miranda and Ferdinand troubled him. There was a realness to it that transcended manipulation, a genuine connection that even the teacher's elaborate scheming hadn't fully manufactured, only revealed. "Tell me, Ferdinand," Prospero said conversationally, "what business brought your father to these waters? Surely a man of his stature doesn't usually accompany minor real estate transactions." Ferdinand looked up, his green eyes still glazed with grief. "I don't know all the details. Something about development rights, offshore accounts. My father dealt with these men." He gestured vaguely at Antonio and the others, "because they had connections he needed. Political donations, I think. Maybe money laundering. I stopped asking questions because the answers always made me feel dirty." Antonio's face hardened. "Careful, boy. Your father's reputation. My father's reputation is that of a corrupt official who takes bribes," Ferdinand said with the blunt honesty of grief. "Everyone knows it. The only question is whether anyone cares enough to prosecute. He told me that's how the world works, that idealism is for children and fools. Maybe he was right. Maybe the world really is just money and power, and whoever has the sharpest knife." He looked at Miranda. "Is that true? Is that all there is?" Miranda's face was troubled. She glanced at her father, seeking guidance. Prospero smiled gently. "The world is exactly what we make of it," the teacher said. "Your father chose one path. You can choose another. We all can, though sometimes the universe must arrange dramatic circumstances to show us that choice exists." He gestured around the pavilion, at the island beyond. 12 years ago, I was stripped of everything: wealth, reputation, security. I was cast into the ocean with an infant daughter and nothing but the clothes on my back. I could have drowned in bitterness. Instead, I swam toward wisdom. "Very poetic," Antonio said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But the reality is you're a failed guru living on a stolen island with a Stockholm Syndrome victim and a drug casualty. You've brainwashed into thinking he controls the weather." The temperature in the pavilion seemed to drop 10 degrees. Prospero's serene expression didn't change, but the lamplight flickered as if a wind had passed through, though the air remained still. "Father," Miranda said quietly, her hand still holding Ferdinand's. Don't what, child?" Prospero's voice remained gentle, but there was something underneath it now. something vast and cold as the ocean depths. Don't show them. Not yet. They're not ready. Ready for what? Sebastian demanded, his earlier drowsiness suddenly gone, replaced by a spike of adrenaline-fueled fear. Ariel stepped forward from the shadows, and his appearance had changed subtly. His eyes reflected the lamplight like a cat's, and his smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. Ready to understand that this island operates by different rules than your corporate boardrooms. Ready to learn that consciousness is more flexible than you imagine. Ready to discover that the teacher isn't speaking metaphorically when he talks about transforming reality. As if to punctuate his words, the drums in the jungle suddenly crescendoed, a wild polyrhythmic pattern that seemed to bypass the ears and vibrate directly in the chest. The flames in the oil lamps turned blue, then green, then back to normal. Somewhere in the distance, something that might have been an animal or might have been Caliban howled at the rising moon. Ferdinand pulled Miranda closer, instinctively protective despite his own fear and confusion. Antonio's face had gone from arrogant to pale. Gonzalo was muttering prayers under his breath. Only Sebastian seemed defiant, though his hands trembled as he reached for his teacup. Prospero stood, his white clothes rippling though no breeze touched them. "Gentlemen, young Ferdinand, I suggest you retire for the evening. Tomorrow begins your education in earnest. Sleep well, and may your dreams teach you what your waking minds resist." It was clearly a dismissal. Ariel moved forward to guide the guests to their quarter-simple cells carved into the hillside, each furnished with only a mat, a blanket, and a small window looking out at the star-filled sky. The sleeping cells were arranged in a semicircle carved into the hillside, each one opening onto a shared courtyard where a fountain burbled quietly under the stars. The rooms were austere as monk cells, whitewashed stone walls, woven grass mats on the floor, a single wool blanket folded at the foot of each mat. Small niches held candles and incense holders. The windows had no glass, only wooden shutters that could be pulled closed against rain. Antonio stood in his cell, staring at the walls as if they were prison bars. His borrowed cotton clothes felt like a costume, a humiliation. Through the window, he could see stars scattered across the sky, like diamonds on black velvet, more stars than he'd ever seen in the light-polluted cities where he conducted his business. The beauty of it made him angry. Everything about this place made him angry. Its simplicity, its peace, its implicit judgment of everything he'd built his life around. In the next cell, Sebastian lay on his mat, but couldn't sleep. The herbal tea had made him drowsy earlier, but now his mind raced. He kept replaying the moment when the storm hit, the pure terror of thinking he would die. And then the impossible calm afterward, the way the weather had simply stopped as if someone had flipped a switch. It wasn't natural. Nothing about this place was natural. He thought about Ariel's eyes reflecting lamplight like an animal's, and he pulled the blanket tighter despite the warm night. Gonzalo, in a third cell, had given up on sleep entirely. He sat cross-legged on his mat in a parody of meditation, his accountant's mind trying to balance an equation that wouldn't resolve. 12 years ago, he had helped Antonio forge documents, had created paper trails that made theft look legal. He'd told himself it was just business, just numbers on a page. But numbers had consequences. Numbers had brought him here, to this island, to face the man he'd helped destroy. For the first time in decades, Gonzalo felt something he'd forgotten how to name: guilt. Ferdinand had been given a cell at the far end of the courtyard, separated from the others. He lay on his mat with his arm across his eyes, trying not to think about his father drowning in dark water, trying not to hear the imagined screams. Instead, he thought about Miranda, the way her hand had felt in his, the flowers in her hair, the genuine compassion in her eyes, so different from the calculated social performances of the women in his usual circles. She was like something from a dream, too pure to be real. But she was real. And somewhere in this strange compound, she was sleeping under the same stars. Miranda, in fact, was not sleeping. She sat in her room larger than the guests' cells, decorated with woven tapestries and shelves of books, and stared at her reflection in a small mirror. She barely recognized herself. Her face looked flushed, her eyes bright with something she'd only read about in the poetry books her father had saved from their old life. She thought about Ferdinand's green eyes, about the way he'd looked at her as if she were the first sunrise he'd ever witnessed. "You're falling," came a voice from her doorway. She turned to see Ariel leaning against the frame, his expression knowing and sad. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but the words were a lie and they both knew it. "Falling in love, that's what the poets call it, right? The ones you read?" Ariel moved into the room, graceful as always. "Your father arranged it, you know. The storm separated Ferdinand from his group deliberately, timed your walk to the beach precisely, orchestrated the whole romantic rescue." Miranda felt something cold settle in her stomach. No, father wouldn't manipulate me like that. Wouldn't he? Ariel sat on the floor beside her, his voice gentle but firm. "Miranda, the teacher loves you more than anything in this world. But he's also been planning his revenge for 12 years. Ferdinand's father was part of the conspiracy that destroyed him. Don't you think it's convenient that the governor's son just happens to wash up where you'll find him? Just happens to be exactly your age, handsome, vulnerable? But what I felt, what I feel, that's real," Miranda insisted, though doubt had crept into her voice. "Maybe it is," Ariel conceded. "Real feelings can grow from artificial circumstances. That doesn't make them less genuine. But you should know the full picture. You should understand that the teacher is playing a very long game, and you're one of the pieces on the board." Miranda was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the drums had finally stopped, leaving only the sound of night insects and the distant ocean. "And you, Ariel, are you a piece too? Or are you the hand that moves them?" Ariel's laugh was bitter. "I'm the most manipulated of all. The teacher saved me, yes, pulled me from an addiction that would have killed me. But he also bound me to his will. I owe him everything, and he reminds me of that debt every day. I can do extraordinary things now, things that seem like magic. But I'm not free. I won't be free until he releases me. Does he plan to? Ever? He promises. Says when his work here is complete, when justice is served and karma balanced, then I can go." Ariel's eyes were distant. "But I think he's grown used to having power over someone. It's addictive, you know, control, even for enlightened masters." Before Miranda could respond, a sound shattered the night, a scream from the direction of the guest cells. Both of them were on their feet instantly, running toward the courtyard. They found Sebastian standing outside his cell, his face white as bone in the starlight. He pointed at his window with a trembling hand. Something was there, a face, not human. Eyes like coals and a mouth full of teeth. It whispered my name, said it knew what I'd done, said the island remembers every sin. Antonio emerged from his cell, irritated and frightened. What the hell is going on? Some kind of psychological warfare. From the shadows at the edge of the courtyard, Caliban's laugh rumbled like distant thunder. The big man stepped into the moonlight, his tattoos seeming to writhe in the uncertain illumination. "The island does remember," he said, his voice thick with malice. "My mother taught it to remember. Before the teacher came and tried to make everything gentle and enlightened, this place had teeth. Still does, if you know how to ask nicely." Prospero appeared then, seeming to materialize from the darkness itself. His face showed concern, but his eyes held something else, satisfaction, perhaps, or the cold calculation of an experiment proceeding as planned. "Gentlemen, please, you're safe here. The island can be temperamental, especially with those whose karmic debts are heavy, but no harm will come to you. You have my word." He turned to Caliban. "You, however, have violated our agreement. Back to your quarters. Now." Caliban's face twisted with resentment, but he shambled away into the darkness, muttering curses. Prospero addressed the shaken guests. "Return to your rest. Tomorrow we begin the real work, the work of transformation, of confronting truth, of balancing the scales. Sleep if you can. The dawn will come regardless." But as the men returned reluctantly to their cells, as Miranda and Ariel exchanged troubled glances, as the island settled back into uneasy quiet, everyone understood the same truth. None of them would sleep soundly tonight. The tempest Prospero had summoned wasn't just weather. It was psychological, spiritual, karmic, and it was only beginning. Dawn broke over the island of transformation with the subtlety of a gong. The sun rose blood-red from the ocean, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose gold. Birds erupted from the jungle in a cacophony of calls that sounded almost like laughter. In the courtyard, the fountain's water caught the early light and turned it into liquid fire. Ferdinand was the first to wake, having barely slept. His dreams had been a confused tangle of his father's face disappearing beneath waves, Miranda's dark eyes, and something else, a presence that had moved through his sleep like a searching hand, sorting through his memories and weighing his soul. He emerged from his cell to find Prospero already sitting in the courtyard, cross-legged in meditation posture, so still he might have been carved from stone. The young man hesitated, unsure whether to disturb the teacher's contemplation. But Prospero's eyes opened smoothly, as if he'd been waiting for precisely this moment. "Ferdinand Alonso," Prospero said, his voice carrying easily across the space between them. "Sit with me. We have things to discuss." Ferdinand approached warily and sat on the stone edge of the fountain. Up close, Prospero's eyes were disconcerting. They seemed to see through flesh and bone, reading the hidden texts of the heart. "Is there news of my father? Did you send someone to search?" "Ariel flew over the island at first light," Prospero said, and the way he said "flew" made it unclear whether he meant literally or metaphorically. "There's no sign of your father's vessel, no other survivors on these shores." I'm sorry. The ocean keeps what it takes." Ferdinand's throat constricted. He'd known somehow, but hearing it confirmed was different. "Then I'm alone. Are you?" Prospero's eyebrow raised slightly. "My daughter would be disappointed to hear that. She spoke of little else but your welfare all through the night. She who has never shown interest in any man, who has lived content in isolation, suddenly cannot stop asking questions about a stranger she met on a beach." Heat rose in Ferdinand's cheeks. "I meant no disrespect. Your daughter was kind to me." "That's all. Kind," Prospero repeated, tasting the word. "Yes, Miranda has a gift for kindness. It comes from being raised without the corruption of your world, without television selling her lies about what she should be, without magazines teaching her that her worth is measured in makeup and male attention, without the poison of jealousy and competition that infects normal society. Ferdinand bristled slightly. My world? You don't know anything about me, don't I? Prospero's smile was knowing. You're the son of a corrupt politician, raised in wealth you didn't earn, surrounded by luxury you didn't question until it became morally fashionable to do so. You've experimented with drugs, probably marijuana and cocaine, maybe LSD once at a party where everyone pretended to achieve enlightenment. You've had girlfriends who bored you because they were too easy to understand, too predictable in their desires. You've felt vaguely dissatisfied with your life, but done nothing substantial to change it, because comfort is a powerful drug and you're addicted to it. Each word landed like a stone. Ferdinand wanted to argue, but the accuracy was too devastating. How do you? I don't need mystical powers to read you, boy. Your type is written in every gesture, every assumption. You're not evil, just lazy. Spiritually lazy. Prospero stood in one fluid motion. But perhaps you can be more. Perhaps meeting my daughter is the catalyst you need for actual transformation. Or perhaps you'll disappoint her as men have disappointed women since the beginning of time. I would never, Ferdinand started. Never what? Hurt her? Lie to her? Use her innocence for your own gratification, and then return to your comfortable life when rescue comes? Prospero's voice had gone cold as winter steel. Words are wind, Ferdinand. Only actions reveal truth. So here are your tasks for today. You will work. Manual labor. You'll carry water from the spring to the garden cisterns. You'll split firewood. You'll help Caliban dig anew the treen pit. You'll do the work that your privilege has always allowed you to avoid. Ferdinand's face flushed with indignation. I'm not your servant. I'm a guest, a shipwreck survivor. You're a boy who wants to court my daughter, Prospero interrupted. And on this island, everything has a price. You want to spend time with Miranda? You want to hold her hand, look into her eyes, whisper sweet words? Then prove you're worthy. Prove you can do something besides spend your father's money and coast on your good looks. It was manipulative, obvious, and completely effective. Ferdinand felt his pride warring with his desire. He thought of Miranda's face, the genuine warmth in her smile, and he made his choice. Fine, where do I start? Prospero's smile returned, warm as sunshine. The spring is east of here, through the gardens. You'll find clay jugs by the path. Fill them and carry them to the cisterns. Miranda will show you where. He paused, his eyes glittering. She's been up for an hour, preparing the morning meal. She's been watching the path, waiting to see if you'd emerge from your cell. A girl in love is an easy thing to read. Ferdinand felt his heart stutter at those words. A girl in love? Was it possible? After just one meeting, in the midst of tragedy and strangeness, could something real be growing? Or was Prospero manipulating both of them, orchestrating emotions like a conductor leading an orchestra? He didn't know. But as he walked toward the gardens and saw Miranda, their hair loose down her back, wearing a simple white dress, arranging fruit on a wooden platter, his doubts evaporated like morning mist. She looked up, saw him, and her face transformed with joy so pure it hurt to witness. Ferdinand, she said, and his name and her voice sounded like music. You're awake. I was worried. After the visions last night, I thought perhaps you'd been frightened. Perhaps you'd want to leave. I can't leave, he said, walking toward her. And even if I could, I don't think I would. Not yet. She smiled, and the sunrise had nothing on her radiance. Father says you're to work today. I'll help you. We can talk while we carry water. I want to know everything about you, your life, your thoughts, what it's like in the cities. I've read so many books, but I've never actually been anywhere except this island. Then I'll tell you everything, Ferdinand promised. Though I'm afraid my life will seem boring compared to growing up in paradise with a mystic for a father. They walked together toward the spring, falling into easy conversation, unaware that from the meditation pavilion above, Prospero watched them with eyes that held both love and calculation. Nearby, hidden in the shadows of a banyan tree, Ariel also watched, his expression troubled. And further still, Caliban observed from behind a rock wall, his face twisted with bitter envy and darker plans. The pieces were all in motion now. The real game was beginning. While Ferdinand and Miranda fell deeper into their enchantment, Antonio and his companions faced a different kind of mourning. They were roused not by birdsong, but by Caliban banging on a metal pot with a wooden spoon, his grin showing crooked teeth. "Rise and shine, corporate lords," he bellowed with obvious pleasure. "The teacher wants you in the main pavilion for breakfast and enlightenment. Mostly enlightenment. You're gonna love it. Or hate it. Either way, gonna be fun to watch." The three men emerged from their cells looking haggard. Sebastian's eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. Gonzalo's usual composure had cracked into something anxious and jumpy. Antonio alone maintained a facade of defiance, though the muscle twitching in his jaw betrayed the effort it cost him. They found Prospero waiting in the pavilion, but this time the space had been transformed. The low table was gone, replaced by cushions arranged in a circle. Incense burned in clay holders, sending up spirals of sandalwood smoke. A large mandala had been drawn on the floor, in colored sand intricate geometric patterns that drew the eye inward in dizzying spirals. "Good morning, gentlemen," Prospero said from his position at the north point of the circle. "Please, sit. We begin your instruction in consciousness today. Your education in reality. I don't need instruction from you," Antonio said, but he sat anyway, because the alternative was standing awkwardly while everyone else settled. Prospero's smile was patient as the ocean. "You don't need instruction in how to steal a brother's life work, and how to forge documents and commit fraud, and how to have a man declared insane so you can seize his assets. You seemed quite expert in those subjects already." "Ancient history," Antonio shot back. "And legal, I might add." Every document was filed properly, every regulation followed. "Ah yes, legal." Prospero's voice dripped with irony. "That wonderful word that lets men sleep at night after committing atrocities. Tell me, brother, when you signed the papers having me committed, when you drugged my tea so I couldn't fight back as they loaded me into that van, was it the legality that made it right? Or was it simply that you wanted what I had?" Sebastian shifted uncomfortably. "Look, what's done is done. You obviously survived. You've built this place. Maybe it's time to let go of the past and—" "Let go?" Prospero's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. Easy words from someone who's never lost everything. "But you're right about one thing. What's done is done. The question is what happens next. Do we repeat our patterns, or do we evolve? Do we cling to our illusions, or do we face truth?" He gestured to Ariel, who had appeared silently at the edge of the pavilion. The young man held a wooden bowl filled with a dark liquid that steamed slightly in the morning air. "This is ayahuasca," Prospero said calmly, "a sacred medicine used for centuries by indigenous shamans to expand consciousness, to pierce the veil of ego and see reality as it truly is. You will each drink, and you will experience what you've spent your lives avoiding, the truth of who you are." All three men recoiled. Antonio stood abruptly. "Absolutely not. You're not drugging us. This is insane, illegal." There's that word again, legal. Prospero remained seated, unruffled. "You're free to refuse, of course, but then you'll remain in ignorance. You'll spend your days here waiting for rescue, haunted by visions you can't explain, pursued by guilt you can't outrun. The island remembers, gentlemen. It knows what you've done. You can face that knowledge consciously, with guidance, or you can face it in your nightmares. Your choice." Gonzalo surprised them all by speaking up, his voice trembling. What if what we see is too terrible? What if we can't come back from it?" "Then you weren't strong enough for truth," Prospero said simply, "but I believe you are. Beneath the corruption, beneath the greed and compromise, there are still human beings who once had ideals, who once believed in something beyond profit margins. It was Sebastian who moved first. Perhaps it was exhaustion or curiosity, or the simple desire to have the psychological torture end. He crawled forward and took the bowl from Ariel's hands. "How much?" "3 swallows," Ariel said, his voice unusually gentle. "And then lie back. I'll be here to guide you through what comes." Sebastian drank, his face contorting at the bitter taste. He passed the bowl to Gonzalo, who hesitated only a moment before drinking as well, his accountant's mind perhaps calculating that cooperation was the most efficient path forward. Antonio stood rigid, watching his companions. "This is coercion. This is an opportunity," Prospero interrupted. "An opportunity you don't deserve, but that I'm offering anyway. Because despite everything, you're still my brother, and some part of me still hopes there's something redeemable in you." The words hit Antonio harder than any accusation. He stared at his brother, at this strange man in white cotton who'd survived exile and emerged transformed into something he couldn't understand. And beneath his anger, beneath his defenses, Antonio felt something crack. Fear, perhaps, or the terrible suspicion that he'd spent 12 years running from a reckoning that was always going to catch him. He took the bowl. He drank. The medicine tasted like earth and death and ancient forests. Within minutes, the pavilion began to breathe. The walls pulsed like living tissue. The mandala on the floor started spinning, its geometric patterns rearranging themselves into faces, faces of everyone they'd betrayed, everyone they'd hurt in their climb toward wealth and power. Sebastian was the first to break, tears streaming down his face as he saw his ex-wife, the woman he'd divorced when she got cancer, because her medical bills threatened his assets. Gonzalo curled into a fetal position, sobbing as he confronted the families he'd made homeless through creative accounting, the elderly clients whose pensions he'd helped embezzle. Antonio fought it longer, his jaw clenched, his fists tight. But the medicine was stronger than pride. He began to see his brother as he'd been 12 years ago, younger, full of genuine passion for spiritual truth, holding his infant daughter with such tenderness. And then he saw himself, saw his own face twisted with greed and jealousy, saw his hands signing documents that destroyed his own blood. "I'm sorry," he gasped, though whether he was speaking to Prospero or to himself or to the universe, he couldn't say. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Prospero watched them all with eyes that held no triumph, only sadness. This was not revenge, this was surgery, cutting out the infected tissue so that healing could begin. The ayahuasca ceremony lasted hours, though time became meaningless in that space between worlds. Ariel moved among the three men like a ministering angel, offering water, adjusting cushions, speaking softly when the visions became too intense. Prospero sat motionless in his position, a lighthouse of calm presence, while storms raged in the minds around him. By midday, when the worst of the journey had passed, the three men lay exhausted on the pavilion floor, their faces slack with the profound fatigue that comes from confronting the deepest parts of the self. They looked like soldiers returning from a war that had been fought entirely inside their own souls. "Water," Gonzalo croaked, and Ariel brought him a clay cup filled with cool spring water, infused with mint leaves. Sebastian had stopped crying, but couldn't seem to stand. He stared at the ceiling, at the patterns of light filtering through the woven palm fronds, and something in his expression had fundamentally changed. The arrogance was gone. What remained was raw and undefended. Antonio was the last to return fully to ordinary consciousness. When he finally focused his eyes on Prospero, there was something in his gaze that hadn't been there before: recognition, perhaps, or the beginning of humility. "What did you see?" Prospero asked gently. Antonio's voice was barely a whisper. "Everything. Every moment I chose money over people. Every time I lied and called it business. Every hurt I caused and justified." He paused, his throat working. "I saw our mother. She was disappointed, not angry. Just sad that I'd wasted the life she gave me on things that don't matter." "And what does matter?" Prospero prompted. Antonio laughed, a broken sound. "I don't know anymore. I thought I knew. Money, power, control. But they're nothing. They're smoke. When I die, and I will die, I saw that too, saw my own death coming faster than I want to admit. None of it comes with me. Just the weight of what I did. Just the karma." He looked at his brother with exhausted honesty. "How do you live with that? How do you carry it?" "You don't carry it," Prospero said. "You transform it. You make amends. You choose differently going forward. That's what karma means, not punishment, but cause and effect. Every choice creates the next moment. You can't undo the past, but you can change what you create from here." From outside the pavilion came the sound of laughter. Miranda's bright joy mixed with Ferdinand's deeper voice. The contrast was stark. In the pavilion, men grappling with their demons. Outside, two young people discovering the simple magic of connection. Caliban heard that laughter too, from where he crouched in the tool shed sharpening a machete against a whetstone. The sound grated on him like nails on slate. He'd been watching Ferdinand all morning, watching the way the pretty boy struggled with the water jugs, clearly unused to physical labor, and watching the way Miranda looked at him like he'd hung the stars personally. Nobody had ever looked at Caliban that way. Miranda flinched when he came near. The teacher treated him like a dangerous animal that had to be managed. Ariel regarded him with contempt barely concealed. Only his mother had loved him, and the teacher had destroyed her, not with violence, but with his enlightened compassion, his solar panels and meditation practices that had slowly strangled the wild magic his mother had cultivated. "Pretty boy won't last," Caliban muttered to himself, testing the machete's edge against his thumb. "Soft hands, soft heart. He'll leave when rescue comes." Break her heart and leave? and the teacher will realize too late that all his planning was for nothing. A voice came from behind him. Planning to do something about it, Caliban? He spun to find Ariel leaning in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Caliban gripped the machete handle tighter. Just doing my work, like always, while you dance attendance on the teacher's revenge fantasies. Be careful, Ariel warned. The teacher has been lenient with you, but his patience has limits. If you interfere with Miranda or Ferdinand, or what? Caliban's face twisted with resentment. He'll punish me more than he already does. I'm already a slave on my own island, my mother's island. This land knew her magic before it knew his meditation circles and Sanskrit prayers. Your mother practiced darkness, Ariel said quietly. She bound spirits with pain. The teacher freed them with compassion. There's a difference. Yeah, his way makes everyone weak and grateful. Her way made them strong and feared. Caliban set down the machete with exaggerated care. But you wouldn't understand strength, would you, Ariel? You're just the teacher's pet. His favorite student who'll never be free because you like your chains too much. The words struck home. Ariel's expression flickered with pain before smoothing back to neutrality. Get back to work. The latrine pit won't dig itself. After Ariel left, Caliban sat in the shadows of the shed, his mind churning. He'd been patient for years, biding his time, learning the teacher's ways while remembering his mother's lessons. The island still remembered her magic. The old rituals could still be performed. And if he could cause enough chaos, if he could turn the teacher's careful plans into disaster, maybe he could reclaim what was rightfully his. By the spring, Ferdinand and Miranda sat on sun-warmed stones, their feet dangling in the clear water. They'd carried dozens of jugs to the cisterns, and Ferdinand's soft hands were already blistering. But he barely noticed. He was lost in Miranda's words as she described growing up on the island, educated by books and stars and her father's teachings. I used to think I was missing something, she said, watching dragonflies skim the water's surface. All the books talk about cities, parties, civilization. But now, meeting you, hearing about your world, she paused, choosing words carefully. I think maybe I had the better education. You learned to navigate corruption. I learned to navigate truth. Ferdinand took her hand, examining the calluses from years of garden work. Teach me then. Teach me to see what you see. Miranda smiled and leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture of trust so complete it made Ferdinand's chest ache. I will, if you teach me about the world beyond. We'll educate each other. Neither of them saw Caliban watching from the jungle's edge, his face dark with schemes. 3 days passed on the island, and with them came transformation. Antonio, Sebastian, and Gonzalo emerged from their ayahuasca journey, fundamentally altered. They worked alongside Caliban, now digging, hauling, tending gardens, their expensive clothes replaced entirely by simple cotton work pants and shirts stained with honest sweat. Their hands developed calluses. Their faces grew bronze from the tropical sun. More importantly, something had shifted behind their eyes. The hardness was gone, replaced by a wounded openness, like men learning to see after a lifetime of blindness. Gonzalo was the most changed. The accountant who had spent decades manipulating numbers to serve greed now sat for hours with the island's books. Simple ledgers that tracked seeds planted, water collected, food harvested. He wept over the elegant mathematics of sustainability, the way everything on the island gave back what it took. It all balances, he kept saying, wonder in his voice. Everything balances if you let it. Sebastian had started a garden of his own, a small plot where he planted vegetables with the careful attention of someone performing penance. He spoke little, but his actions were loud hauling compost, building trellises, watering seedlings with a tenderness he'd never shown his ex-wife during her illness. Antonio was the most resistant, even broken as he was. He worked hard, said little, but watched his brother constantly with an expression mixing shame and something else, perhaps the beginning of understanding. On the third evening, he finally approached Prospero as the teacher sat in meditation, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of violet and gold. "I want to ask your forgiveness," Antonio said without preamble, "but I don't know if I have that right. I don't know if 12 years of suffering on my part can balance 12 years of suffering on yours." Prospero opened his eyes and regarded his brother steadily. "Forgiveness isn't arithmetic, Antonio. It's not about balancing scales. It's about releasing poison before it kills the one who carries it." He paused. "But I'm not ready yet. I'm still working toward it. Even enlightenment doesn't erase being human." It was the most honest thing Prospero had said, and Antonio nodded slowly, accepting it. "Then I'll wait, and I'll work, and maybe someday you'll believe I've changed." "Maybe," Prospero agreed. "Now go. Tomorrow we have a ceremony to prepare. Ferdinand has completed his tests. He's proven himself worthy, or at least worthy enough for a young man raised in luxury. Tomorrow I give my blessing to his courtship of Miranda, and you'll all witness it." That night, Prospero gathered Ariel on the highest terrace where the copper-domed meditation pavilion gleamed under a full moon. The teacher looked tired, the first time Ariel had seen genuine fatigue in his master's face. "Tomorrow we perform the ceremony," Prospero said, "and then we're done. The work is complete. Antonio and the others are genuinely transformed. I've watched them, tested them, seen into their hearts. Ferdinand loves Miranda truly, not for her looks or innocence, but for who she is, and she loves him the same. Justice is served, karma is balanced." Ariel's heart leaped. And then I release you." Prospero smiled, warm and sad. "You've served faithfully, Ariel. You've been son, student, servant, and friend. You deserve your freedom. After the ceremony, you can go wherever you wish. California, New York, India, anywhere you want to explore consciousness without me directing your path." Ariel felt tears prick his eyes. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me create beauty one last time. Tomorrow we'll stage a celebration unlike anything this island has seen. Music, dancing, a feast. We'll marry the old wisdom to the new age. We'll show them all what's possible when humans live in harmony with themselves and the earth." They spent hours planning it, the decorations, the music, the ritual elements. Prospero would blend Hindu wedding traditions with contemporary spiritual aesthetics. There would be flower garlands and incense, meditation and rock music played on Ariel's guitar, vegetarian feast, and sacramental wine. It would be a ceremony honoring both tradition and transformation. What they didn't know was that Caliban had been listening from the shadows below the terrace, his face darkening with each word. A celebration. A wedding ceremony. The pretty boy officially claiming Miranda, while Caliban remained the outcast, the servant, the monster. He crept away through the night jungle to a cave his mother had shown him years ago, before the teacher came. Inside, carved into the stone, were symbols in a language older than Sanskrit, older than civilization. His mother had taught him their meanings before the fever took her symbols of binding and breaking. of summoning and banishing. Caliban had been patient. He'd pretended to accept his role, bowed his head to the teacher's enlightened authority. But patience had its limits. If Prospero wanted a ceremony, Caliban would give him one. He would wake the old magic, the darkness that still slept in the island's bones. He would show them all that crystals and meditation were children's toys compared to the real power his mother had wielded. He began to chant in the language she'd taught him, his voice rough but gaining confidence as the words came back. The cave seemed to listen, the shadows seemed to thicken, and somewhere deep in the island's volcanic heart, something that had been sleeping for years began to stir. Meanwhile, in her room, Miranda tried on the dress her father had kept stored for years, her mother's wedding sari, adapted for her frame. It was silk the color of marigolds, embroidered with gold thread and patterns of lotuses and peacocks. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a woman she barely recognized. 3 days ago she'd been a girl who'd never known anyone beyond her father and 2 strange men. Now she was preparing for a ceremony that would bind her life to Ferdinand's. "Are you frightened?" Ferdinand asked from her doorway. Prospero had relaxed the separation rules, allowing them time together under the stars. "Yes," Miranda admitted, "but also excited. Is that wrong? Should I be more serious?" Ferdinand crossed to her and took both her hands. "I think you should be exactly what you are. That's what I love about you. You're real. Everyone in my world wears masks. You're the first person I've met who's genuinely herself." They kissed then, gentle and sweet, and neither of them felt the tremor that ran through the island's foundation. Neither heard the distant sound of drums that wasn't Prospero's meditation music, but something older and darker. The ceremony was set for noon tomorrow, but the island had other plans. Morning arrived wrong. The sun rose behind a haze that hadn't been there the night before, turning the sky a sickly yellow-gray. The birds were silent. Even the ocean seemed muted, its waves hitting the shore with dull thuds instead of their usual rhythmic crash. The air felt thick, oppressive, like breathing through wet wool. Prospero noticed immediately. He stood on his terrace, his meditation interrupted by the wrongness pressing against his consciousness. This wasn't natural weather. This was something else, something that tasted of old blood and older magic. "Ariel," he called, and the young man appeared within seconds, his face troubled. "You feel it too?" Ariel asked. "Something's pushing against the island's energy. It's like a stain spreading through clean water." "Caliban." Prospero said the name like a diagnosis. "He's done something. Invoked something. I should have watched him more carefully." They found the evidence in the cave an hour later, the symbols carved into stone, recently marked with what looked like chicken blood. Candle wax pooled on the floor, and in the center of the space a crude effigy made of sticks and cloth that unmistakably represented Ferdinand, with thorns driven through its chest. Prospero's face went pale. "This is Sycorax's work, her tradition. I thought I'd cleanse the island of these practices, but Caliban must have preserved them, kept them secret." He knelt to examine the symbols more closely. "This is a summoning. He's calling the old spirits, the ones his mother bound with pain and blood sacrifice. If he completes the ritual, what happens?" Ariel's voice was tight with fear. "Chaos, violence, the island itself will turn against us. All the peace we've built, all the transformation we've achieved, it will unravel." Prospero stood, his jaw set. "We need to find him before he finishes what he started." But Caliban had planned well. While Prospero and Ariel searched the island, He'd positioned himself exactly where he wanted to be, near the pavilion, where the ceremony preparations were underway. Miranda was there with Ferdinand, hanging flower garlands and arranging cushions. Antonio, Sebastian, and Gonzalo were helping, their faces showing genuine pleasure in contributing to something beautiful. Caliban emerged from the jungle like a storm cloud, his eyes wild, his body radiating rage that had festered for years. In his hands he carried his machete, the blade catching the strange yellow light. "This ends now," he announced, his voice carrying across the pavilion. Everyone froze. Ferdinand instinctively moved in front of Miranda, though he had no weapon, no way to defend her. Antonio and the others stood slowly, hands raised in placating gestures. "Caliban, whatever this is about, we can talk," Antonio started. "Talk?" Caliban's laugh was ugly. "You want to talk? Like the teacher talked to my mother?" Smiled and meditated and slowly choked the life out of her magic with his enlightenment. She was powerful. She made the island fear her, respect her. Then he came with his peace and compassion and killed her as surely as if he'd used poison. "Your mother died of fever," Miranda said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My father tried to save her. He gave her medicine, sat with her. He gave her weakness," Caliban roared. "Made her soft, made her doubt the old ways. And when she died, he took everything. Made me his servant on my own land. Made me carry water and dig latrines while he plays guru to rich criminals and lets pretty boys steal the only beautiful thing this island has." His eyes fixed on Ferdinand with pure hatred. "You think you can just take her? You think your soft hands and pretty words mean anything? You're nothing. You're a tourist who'll leave when your real life calls." Ferdinand's voice shook but held firm. "I love her. I'm not leaving. Whatever happens, wherever we go, she comes with me. Or I stay with her. We're together. Love?" Caliban spat the word like venom. "You don't know what love is. Love is staying when there's no other choice. Love is serving and getting nothing back. Love is watching something beautiful every day and knowing you'll never touch it, never have it, because you're too ugly, too wrong, too broken." For a moment, something like compassion flickered in Miranda's eyes. "Caliban, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you felt alone. Sorry my father was hard on you. But this threatening us with a blade, this isn't the way. There's no other way." Caliban's voice cracked. "I tried being good, tried being obedient. And what did it get me? More work, more contempt, more watching everyone else get what they want while I get nothing." He raised a machete. "So if I can't have happiness, I'll settle for revenge." He moved toward Ferdinand with surprising speed for such a large man. Ferdinand stood his ground, arms spread to protect Miranda. But before Caliban could reach them, the earth itself heaved. The tremor started small, a vibration in the stones, a rattling of the flower garlands. Then it grew, violent enough to throw everyone to their knees. The pavilion's support posts cracked. Tiles fell from the roof. And from the jungle came sounds that shouldn't exist, howls that were neither animal nor human. Crashes as if invisible giants were tearing through the trees. Caliban stumbled backward, his triumph turning to confusion and then fear. "No, not yet. I didn't finish the summoning. They shouldn't be." Prospero appeared at the edge of the pavilion, Ariel beside him. The teacher's face was terrible in its serenity, all warmth gone, replaced by something ancient and implacable. "You opened a door you don't know how to close, Caliban. You called spirits without the knowledge to control them. Now they'll feast on whatever consciousness they find, including yours. The sky had gone nearly black despite the noon hour. Lightning cracked without thunder. The air smelled of ozone and rot, and in the darkness between the trees, shapes moved, forms that seemed to be made of shadow and old anger, drawn to the island by Caliban's clumsy ritual. "Help me," Caliban whimpered, the machete falling from his hands. "Teacher, please. I didn't know. I didn't understand." Prospero's expression softened slightly. "Of course you didn't. You were a child playing with your mother's tools, not understanding their purpose or their price." He turned to Ariel. "Gather everyone in the meditation hall. The copper dome will provide some protection. I need to contain what he's unleashed." "Alone?" Ariel's face was stricken. "Master, you can't. I can, and I must. This is my island now, my responsibility. Get them to safety. All of them, including Caliban." Ariel herded everyone toward the copper-domed meditation hall at the island's highest point. Miranda clung to Ferdinand's hand as they ran up the stone steps. Antonio supported Gonzalo, whose age made the climb difficult. Sebastian half-dragged, half-carried Caliban, who had gone nearly catatonic with terror. Behind them, the island screamed. The shadows had taken form now, creatures that looked like they'd been assembled from nightmares and cultural memory. There were things with too many limbs, faces that shifted between human and animal, forms that seemed to be made of smoke, but left very real claw marks on trees. They circled the compound like sharks, drawn by the living consciousness within, but unable yet to fully manifest. Prospero stood alone in the pavilion, his white clothes whipping in a wind that came from no natural direction. He had assumed the meditation posture, but his hands formed mudras that were older than Buddhism, older than Hinduism, hand positions that reached back to the first humans who'd learned to shape reality with will and breath. "You were called without proper offering," Prospero said to the darkness, his voice carrying impossible authority. "You were summoned without respect, without understanding. But I understand. I know your names. I know what binds you and what sets you free." The shadows seemed to hesitate, as if considering his words. One of them coalesced into something almost recognizable, a woman's form, dark-skinned and massive, with eyes that burned like coals. Sycorax, or something wearing her memory like a coat. "Teacher," the apparition spoke with a voice like grinding stones. "You brought light to our dark. You brought peace to our chaos. You weakened the threshold between worlds with your meditation and your solar panels. Made the island soft. Made it vulnerable. I brought balance," Prospero corrected. "Your way was all shadow. No light can exist without casting shadow, but shadow without light is only void, is only destruction, and yet destruction is sometimes necessary," Sycorax's shade replied. "Sometimes the old must burn completely before the new can grow." Prospero felt sweat bead on his forehead, the first sign of strain. Holding this many spirits at bay while maintaining coherent conversation was costing him more energy than he'd anticipated. "If you want destruction, start with the one who summoned you. Caliban called you without knowledge or respect. He deserves your wrath more than these innocents." "The boy is his mother's son," the shade said. "Clumsy, yes. Ignorant, yes. But he carries our blood. You, teacher, are the outsider. You remade our island in your image. Perhaps it's time you paid the price for that presumption." The shadows began to circle closer. Prospero could feel them testing his defenses, looking for weaknesses in his concentration. He needed more time, needed to reach deeper into the reservoir of power he'd spent 12 years cultivating. But doubt crept in. Had he grown soft? Had his pursuit of enlightenment weakened the fiercer aspects of his will? In the meditation hall, the group huddled together under the copper dome. The metal structure hummed with a frequency that seemed to keep the worst of the darkness at bay, but they could all feel the malevolence pressing against it like water against a dam. "This is my fault," Caliban moaned, rocking back and forth. "I killed us all. The teacher can't stop them. My mother's spirits are too strong." "Shut up," Ariel snapped, his usual ethereal calm shattered by fear for his master. "The teacher is powerful. He's faced darkness before. A tremendous crash cut him off." Through the window, they saw one of the compound's buildings collapse as something massive and invisible tore through it. Prospero staggered, blood trickling from his nose, the first sign that the battle was taking a physical toll. Miranda made a sound of distress and moved toward the door, but Ferdinand held her back. "You can't help him. We'd only distract him." "He's my father," Miranda said, tears streaming. "I can't just watch him. You have to," Antonio said quietly. He'd moved to the window, his face pale but set. "This is his fight. The karma is his to balance. All we can do is have faith that he's strong enough." It was perhaps the most spiritual thing Antonio had ever said, and coming from him it steadied them all. Outside, Prospero had changed tactics. Instead of fighting the spirits, he began to sing. It was a bhajan, a devotional song he'd learned from his guru in India decades ago, before everything fell apart. The words were Sanskrit, praising the divine in all its forms, light and shadow, creation and destruction, mercy and justice. The shadows recoiled at first, as if the sound burned them. But Prospero kept singing, and slowly, subtly, the tone shifted. He wasn't banishing them. He was inviting them to remember what they'd been before Sycorax bound them with pain and blood. Spirits of place, guardians of the island, wild but not evil, twisted by her magic into weapons, but originally something else. Sycorax's shade screamed a sound of rage and perhaps recognition. "You would undo my work, the power I built?" "I would free what you enslaved," Prospero said between verses. "I would restore balance. Not my balance or yours, the balance that existed before either of us came here." The song grew stronger, and Ariel, hearing it from the meditation hall, added his voice. Then Miranda joined, her clear soprano harmonizing with her father's baritone. One by one, the others added their voices, even Antonio, even Caliban, even those who didn't know the words, but could feel the intention behind them. The copper dome amplified their song, sending it out across the island like a blessing. And slowly, impossibly, the shadows began to dissolve. Not destroyed, transformed, released from the bindings of anger and pain that had kept them in twisted forms. Sycorax's shade was the last to fade, and before she went, her burning eyes found Caliban through the window. "Foolish boy," she said, "but there was almost affection in it. Your mother's power was never meant for revenge. It was meant for protection. Remember that." Then she was gone, and the island was silent. Prospero collapsed to his knees, utterly spent. The sun broke through the clouds, normal and golden, as if the darkness had never been. The afternoon after the darkness was the most beautiful the island had ever known. The sky turned a blue so pure it seemed to ring like crystal. Flowers that had closed against the malevolence now opened in explosions of color. Hibiscus red as blood, plumeria white as clouds, orchids and shades of purple that seemed to glow from within. The ocean returned to its gentle rhythm, and dolphins appeared in the bay, leaping as if celebrating. Prospero lay in the meditation hall, attended by Miranda and Ariel. His face was gray with exhaustion, his breathing shallow. The battle with the spirits had cost him more than any of them had realized. His hands trembled when he tried to lift them, and his voice came out as barely a whisper. "It's done," he managed. "The island is clean, balanced. The old debts are paid." "Don't talk," Miranda said, tears streaming down her face as she pressed a cool cloth to his forehead. "Save your strength. You need to rest, to heal." "I will," Prospero smiled weakly. "But first, Antonio. I need to speak with Antonio." His brother came immediately, kneeling beside Prospero's mat, with a face full of grief and something that looked like awe. "I'm here, Marcus. I'm here." "You can. You will." Prospero's hand found his brother's. "You've changed. I've watched you. The ayahuasca opened you, but you did the real work. You chose transformation. That matters more than the 12 years before." "What do you need?" Antonio asked. "Tell me how to help you. Money, resources, anything." "I need you to take care of something for me," Prospero said, his eyes shifting to Miranda and Ferdinand, who stood together near the window, their hands intertwined. If this takes longer to heal than I have time for, I need you to protect them, my daughter and the boy she loves. Make sure they're safe, that they have what they need to build a life." "You're not dying," Miranda said fiercely. "Father, you're not allowed to die. Not after everything. Not now." But Prospero's eyes held a knowledge that scared her. He'd seen something in the battle with the spirits, glimpsed something on the other side of the veil. His time wasn't measured in years anymore. Maybe months, maybe weeks. "We're all dying, child," he said gently. "From the moment we're born. The only question is whether we live first. And I have lived 12 years of real living, of purpose and growth and love. That's more than most people get in 80 years of just existing." Ariel stood apart, his face a mask of pain. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. The teacher was supposed to release him to freedom, and they were supposed to part with gratitude and blessings. Not like this. Not with Prospero broken, possibly dying, having spent his life force to save them all from Caliban's mistake. Outside the meditation hall, Caliban sat alone on a stone wall, staring at his hands as if they belonged to a stranger. The machete lay in the dirt where he dropped it, already beginning to rust. He'd caused this. His rage, his jealousy, his refusal to transform like the others, it had nearly destroyed everything. Had possibly killed the only man who'd ever tried to teach him something beyond violence. Gonzalo found him there as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The older man sat beside Caliban without speaking, just sharing the silence and the guilt. After a long time, Gonzalo said quietly, "I spent 40 years moving numbers around to hide rich men's crimes, made families homeless, destroyed retirement funds, told myself it was just business, just paper, not real harm, but it was real. Every number represented a human life I helped damage." Caliban glanced at him, surprised the accountant was confiding in him. "What the teacher showed me," Gonzalo continued, "was that it's never too late to choose differently. The past is written, but the next moment isn't. You nearly killed us all, yes, but you didn't, and now you get to decide what you do with that knowledge. Drown in it or grow from it." "I don't know how to grow," Caliban said, his voice thick. My mother taught me power and anger. The teacher tried to teach me peace, but I never believed it was real. How do you learn to be something you've never seen? By watching, Gonzalo said. By trying. By failing and trying again. He stood, bones creaking. Come help me prepare dinner. The teacher needs nourishment, and work helps when thinking hurts too much. Slowly, Caliban rose and followed him to the kitchen. As evening settled over the island, a sound reached them that everyone had stopped expecting. A boat engine. They all emerged from their various locations to see a Coast Guard cutter rounding the point, its white hull gleaming in the golden light. Someone must have finally tracked the Prosperity's last known location, sent out a search and rescue mission. Ferdinand felt Miranda's hand tighten in his. This was at the moment when his old life would come rushing back, when decisions would have to be made about where they belonged and who they would become. Antonio watched the approaching boat with a complex expression. Rescue meant returning to his world of business and legal troubles, to questions about what had happened on the island. But it also meant resources, hospitals, the ability to help his brother properly, if Prospero would accept that help. Ariel stood beside Prospero, who had insisted on being helped to the terrace despite his weakness. The teacher watched the boat approach with serene acceptance. So, he said softly, the real world returns. Time to see if the transformations hold outside this bubble of isolation. The Coast Guard lieutenant was a woman in her 30s with sun-weathered skin and the practical demeanor of someone who'd seen everything the ocean could throw at humanity. Her name was Chun, and she climbed the beach with a clipboard and a medical kit, her eyes scanning the group that emerged from the jungle compound. We've been searching for the yacht Prosperity for 4 days, she said without preamble. Registered to Antonio Prospero. Also tracking a second vessel, the Helena, registered to Governor Alonso. You're the survivors? Some of them, Antonio said, stepping forward. He looked nothing like the man who'd boarded that yacht. His expensive haircut had grown shaggy, his designer clothes replaced by cotton work pants and a sun-faded shirt. Antonio Prospero. These are my associates Sebastian and Gonzalo. We're alive, obviously. The yacht is wrecked on the North Beach. And the governor's vessel? Chun's eyes were sharp. Ferdinand came forward, his voice steady despite the grief underneath. Lost. I was the only survivor from the Helena. My father, Governor Alonso, he didn't make it. The storm took him. Chun's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry for your loss, son. We'll need full statements from all of you. There'll be investigations, recovery efforts. She turned to take in the compound above them. This is quite an operation. Who else is living here? I am, Prospero said, appearing at the top of the path with Miranda supporting him on one side, Ariel on the other. Even weakened, he carried an authority that made Chun straighten unconsciously. This is my sanctuary. Has been for 12 years. These men were shipwrecked here. I provided hospitality. Chun's eyes narrowed, her professional instincts engaged. 12 years on an unregistered island. No permits, no communication with authorities. That's complicated legally. Many things are complicated legally, Prospero replied with a faint smile, but rarely as complicated as they are morally or spiritually. Right, Chun said, clearly deciding that conversation was above her pay grade. Well, we're here to evacuate survivors and conduct preliminary investigations. I'll need everyone who wants rescue to be on the beach in 2 hours with whatever possessions they're taking. Medical examinations will be conducted on the cutter. The group stood in heavy silence after Chun descended back to the beach to coordinate with her team. This was the moment of choice, and everyone felt it like a weight on their chests. Sebastian spoke first. "I'm going back. I have to. There's my ex-wife. I need to see her. Try to apologize properly. And my daughter. I haven't spoken to her in 3 years. The ayahuasca showed me I have work to do, amends to make." "Can't do that from an island?" Gonzalo nodded slowly, saying, "I need to face what I've done. Turn state's evidence, probably. Tell the truth about all the financial crimes I helped enable. It'll mean prison, most likely, but that seems right. More honest than hiding in paradise?" All eyes turned to Antonio. He looked at his brother, at Miranda, at the compound that represented 12 years of transformation he'd nearly destroyed. "I want to help," he said finally. "Marcus, you need medical care, real doctors. Let me arrange it. Let me use my money for something that actually matters. And," he paused, choosing words carefully, "I want to help dissolve the celestial light ashram properly. Return it to what you intended. Set up a foundation in your name. It won't undo the past, but it's something." Prospero's eyes gleamed with tears. "Thank you, brother. I accept." Ferdinand and Miranda had drifted apart from the group, their own conversation quiet and intense. Now they returned, their decision written on their faces. "I'm staying," Ferdinand announced. "For now, at least, my father is dead. I'm his only heir, which means I have resources, responsibilities. But I'm not ready to go back yet. I need time to grieve properly, to integrate what I've learned here. And he looked at Miranda, I need to be with her. I'm staying too," Miranda said firmly. "This is my home. My father needs me, but Ferdinand and we'll figure out the future together. Maybe we split our time, some here, some in the world. But together." Chun had given them 2 hours, and they used every minute. Prospero directed the packing with careful intention. He gave Antonio specific books, journals documenting 12 years of spiritual practice and teaching. He gave Gonzalo seeds from the garden, heirloom vegetables, medicinal herbs, with planting instructions. "Start a garden wherever you end up," he told the accountant. "Even in prison. Especially in prison. Growth is the antidote to stagnation." To Sebastian, he gave a small statue of Buddha that had survived the original exile. "Your ex-wife will die within 2 years," Prospero said gently, shocking Sebastian. "The cancer returned months ago. She hasn't told you because she doesn't want your guilt-driven attention, but you need companionship through the end. Not romance, just honest presence. Can you give her that?" Sebastian nodded, unable to speak, clutching the statue like a lifeline. The most difficult goodbye was between Prospero and Ariel. The teacher took his student to the copper-domed pavilion, the place where so much transformation had occurred. "You're free," Prospero said simply. "The boat can take you to the mainland. From there, anywhere you want. India, Nepal, California, New York. You have skills now, both practical and mystical. You can teach, heal, guide others. Or you can just live, explore, discover who Ariel is when he's not my student." Ariel's face worked with emotion. "I don't know if I can leave you. Not like this. Not with you injured. I have Miranda and Ferdinand. I have Caliban, who I think is finally ready to learn what I've been trying to teach him." Prospero touched Ariel's face with gentle affection. You stayed out of debt and loyalty, but a teacher who keeps a student past his time of learning is just a jailer. Go, live, and know that you were loved. They embraced, and when they separated, Ariel's face was wet with tears, but also bright with something new, possibility. On the beach, the Zodiac waited to ferry the departing back to the cutter. Antonio, Sebastian, Gonzalo, and Ariel stood together, an unlikely fellowship forged in crisis and transformation. The Zodiac made 3 trips to ferry everyone to the Coast Guard cutter. From the beach, Prospero watched it happen, leaning on Miranda and Ferdinand, Caliban standing awkwardly behind them, like a shadow finally learning to exist in daylight. As the cutter's engines rumbled to life, preparing to depart, something unexpected happened. The dolphins that had been playing in the bay suddenly surrounded the vessel, dozens of them leaping and calling. The water itself seemed to shimmer with unusual luminescence despite the daylight. On deck, Ariel felt it a final gift from the island, from the teacher, from the magic that had transformed them all. A blessing for the journey ahead? Lieutenant Chun noticed none of this, busy with her reports and radio communications. But Antonio, Sebastian, and Gonzalo stood at the rail watching the island recede, and they all felt it. They were leaving something sacred behind. Not escaping. Not being rescued. Leaving. Will we ever come back? Sebastian asked quietly. Does it matter? Gonzalo replied, his accountant's logic transformed into something wiser. The island came with us, in here. He touched his chest. The real journey starts now. The cutter turned north toward the mainland, toward civilization and consequences, and the hard work of living transformed lives in an untransformed world. On the beach, Prospero allowed himself to be led back up to the compound. Each step cost him, but he refused to be carried. I walked onto this island with my daughter in my arms, he said. I'll walk its paths until I can't anymore. They settled him in his room simple as ever, but with windows open to the breeze and the sound of the ocean. Miranda prepared medicinal tea while Ferdinand helped adjust cushions. Even Caliban appeared in the doorway, uncertain but present. Come in, Prospero invited. You're not a servant anymore, Caliban. You're a resident, a guardian. This island was your mother's before it was mine. When I'm gone, it'll need someone who knows both traditions, her fierce magic, and my gentle wisdom. Can you hold that balance? Caliban's face showed naked vulnerability. I don't know. I've never been good at balance. Only extremes. Then learn, Prospero said simply. Miranda and Ferdinand will help. They're staying, at least for now. You won't be alone with the responsibility. Over the following weeks, as Prospero's strength slowly returned, not fully, never fully, but enough, a new rhythm established itself on the island. Ferdinand proved surprisingly adept at the physical work, his soft hands developing calluses as he learned to maintain the gardens and repair structures. Miranda taught him to read the island's moods, to recognize which plants were medicinal and which were poisonous, to navigate by stars and currents. Caliban, freed from servitude and resentment, began to open like a flower too long in shadow. He taught Ferdinand the locations of the best fishing spots, showed Miranda hiding places he'd kept secret for years. And slowly, painfully, he began to share his mother's knowledge, not the dark bindings and blood magic, but the deeper wisdom underneath. How to listen to the land, how to work with spirits instead of enslaving them, how to be a guardian rather than a conqueror. Letters arrived monthly by boat supplies and correspondence coordinated through Antonio, who proved true to his word. Sebastian's letters spoke of difficult but meaningful conversations with his ex-wife, of sitting beside her through chemotherapy, of his daughter slowly allowing him back into her life. Gonzalo wrote from federal prison where he was serving 5 years for financial crimes he'd confessed to, but his words were peaceful, describing the garden he'd started in the prison yard, teaching other inmates about growth and transformation. Antonio's letters were the longest. He wrote about dismantling the corrupt Celestial Light ashram and rebuilding it as a genuine non-profit, free of charge to anyone seeking authentic spiritual guidance. He wrote about therapy, about making amends to the countless people he'd hurt in his climb to wealth, and he wrote about visiting their mother's grave for the first time in 20 years, finally able to face her memory with something like honor. Ariel's postcards came from everywhere: Kathmandu, Big Sur, Amsterdam, Kyoto. Each one showed him a little more himself, a little less the teacher's creation. Found a meditation group in Boulder. One read. Led them through a practice, and they asked if I'd train with someone famous. Told them yes, the most famous teacher no one's ever heard of. As the year turned and 1978 approached, Prospero called his small family together in the copper-domed pavilion. His body was frailer now, his movements careful, but his eyes remained bright with consciousness. "I'm dying," he announced without preamble. "Not today, probably not this month, but soon." The battle with the spirits took more than I could fully recover. "So we need to discuss the future." Miranda started to protest, but he raised a gentle hand. "Peace, child. Death isn't failure. It's transformation. I've had a good life, a complete life. 2 lives, really. The one I lost and the one I built from the ruins. Both necessary." He looked at Ferdinand. "You'll marry my daughter properly, with whatever ceremony feels right to both of you. You'll protect this place, but you'll also help her engage with the wider world. Balance, always balance. To Caliban. You're released from all debts, all obligations. This island is yours as much as anyone's. Be its guardian. Let it teach you what I couldn't." And to Miranda, his voice softening, "You're my greatest achievement. Not this compound, not the transformations I facilitated, not the justice I orchestrated, you. Your compassion, your wisdom, your ability to see good even in Caliban when everyone else saw only monster. You're proof that love is stronger than revenge, that nurture can overcome trauma. Live fully. Love deeply. And know your father died content." The ceremony happened on the spring equinox. Ferdinand and Miranda were married at sunset, with Caliban officiating, reading from both Sanskrit texts and his mother's old Creole prayers, blending traditions into something new. Antonio arrived for it, gray-haired now and genuinely humble, giving away the bride with tears streaming down his face. Ariel came from California, playing guitar and singing blessings. Prospero watched from a chair, too weak to stand for long, but his face showed pure joy. He died 3 days later in his sleep with Miranda holding one hand and Antonio holding the other. His last words were, "The tempest is over. The sea is calm. It's time to rest." They buried him on the highest point of the island, under the copper dome, where he could watch over everything he'd built and everything he'd released. The headstone was simple: Marcus Prospero, teacher. He transformed his suffering into wisdom, and his wisdom into love. The island lived on, a place between worlds where transformation remained possible, where old magic and new consciousness coexisted, where people could come to lose themselves and find what mattered. And every year, on the anniversary of his death, dolphins appeared in the bay, leaping as if celebrating. The tempest had passed, but its lessons rippled outward, changing everyone it touched, teaching that destruction and creation are partners in the eternal dance, that revenge can transform into forgiveness, and that the greatest magic is simply choosing, moment by moment, to grow.